This is The World According to Jen and Carolyn. Good morning.
Good morning. Are you ready?
I don't know. I might revoke my good morning because this is definitely going to put me in a bad mood, but it's also very cathartic.
I'm excited to get this over with.
Yeah.
It's, like you said, it's living in our heads.
I think it needs to get out into the ether. We need to vomit it out of our brains where it's living rent free, though it's not going to go away because what we're talking about today and in our next episode, this had to be a two-parter because there's just too much to process, as we said in grad school. We're going to talk about Donald Trump. This one is titled The Man, the Myth, the Megalomaniac, and this is part one. So we're going to take you on a journey in this first part through Trump's childhood and his rise to fame and ultimately his embarrassing bungling of one of the most sacred and significant jobs in the world. Whee! And so we love us some Mary Trump. Clearly, we're big fans of psychology on the show. So we're going to go deep into Trump's psychology, discuss some of the pivotal factors that contribute to the development of his most toxic traits, and take the second part is going to be a deep kind of psychological dive into what happened on January 6th and why so many people were galvanized to participate in really what was an attempted coup on behalf of their beloved leader.
Yeah.
I don't think people are looking so much at the psychology of these followers and at the fact that this really is a cult.
I would agree.
Yeah. And Trump is very much a cult leader. And we've done an episode on cults. And if you need a refresher, I highly suggest to go back and listen to that one. But just do it before part two, because that's when we're really going to delve deeply into the cult psychology and why we think Donald Trump is a cult leader and his followers are part of his cult.
Yeah.
So let's jump into it. We're snowflakes.
I'm going to awkwardly laugh through a lot of this because I'm very I'm activated.
Yeah, activated.
That's what I do when I'm uncomfortable.
Right?
I laugh.
No, I think a lot of us do that.
Crying.
Oh, God. Today's going to be a wild ride, y'all. So we're snowflakes. I think we've already kind of broken down how we're feeling about all of this. I'm incredibly nervous with the impending election. Incredibly nervous. Trump is literally fighting for his freedom right now.
Yeah.
He wants to get into that White House so he doesn't have to go to jail, which my hope is that will happen.
What a dichotomy, even just saying that. His options are he's going to get elected as president or go to jail.
Right.
What the fuck?
When in most states in this country, if you are a felon, you can't even vote. Yeah, yet you can hold the highest office in the land. Makes no sense to me. It's really backward. I think we should reevaluate that shit. Anyway, I am feeling somewhat cautiously hopeful, but we've seen this movie before in terms of, really smart woman who knows their shit and has been in politics for a long time, going up against somebody who doesn't appear to have much of a brain in his head and, losing the electoral votes, not the popular vote. We have to remember.
Well, and we've also seen this shit too before of a authoritative dictator rising to power.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, la, la, la.
Yeah.
I don't think everyone's la, 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 but you know what I mean? Like, we've seen that before too.
Well, there's too many of us, I think, who are like, the logical amongst us who don't want to see Trump win are like, okay, we can endure 4 more years of this. But as we're going to talk about in this episode and the next episode, 1, I don't think our democracy can endure another 4 years of Donald Trump. 2, we really have to take into consideration the state of this planet and the disastrous environmental policies that happened under Trump 1. Pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, I know we sound like a bunch of hippies, but we are.
I'm okay with that.
And
Call me a hippie.
It's also scientific fact. It's indisputable scientific fact that overall the world is warming. The sea level temperatures are rising. Ice caps and shit are melting. This is having a very deleterious impact on our planet, and we don't have very long to right the ship or we're fucked.
Yeah.
And I worry that 4 more years of Trump policies
But let's build a wall.
Yeah. Well, that never happened. He ran on building a wall that Mexico would pay for. He didn't build a fucking wall.
That wasn't his fault, though.
Yeah, of course.
From what I've heard.
Of course not.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so let's jump into this, shall we? So part one, we're going to look at Trump's childhood, real estate empire, rise to reality TV stardom. So we're going to start with that. So let's start with an excerpt from our girl Mary Trump's book. Now, Mary Trump is his niece, and she wrote a book called Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. Not hyperbolic at all. I think that is absolutely accurate, Mary. So she writes, a baby is born into a family where he's ignored by his father. When he does receive his father's attention, his father constantly yells at, criticizes, or punishes him. For the first 2 years of his life, this child's mother is perfunctorily attentive, but not loving, and then abandons him for a year. She got sick.
Yeah.
From the time he was born until he was an adult, he witnessed his father abuse his older brother by terrorizing him verbally. This leads to his older brother becoming an alcoholic and dying at the age of 42. Jesus. He sees his parents engaged in an emotionally neglectful, if not emotionally abusive marriage. Now, Mary Trump describes Fred Trump, Trump's dad, as a high-functioning sociopath. She writes, in order to cope, Donald began to develop powerful but primitive defenses, marked by an increasing hostility to others and a seeming indifference to his mother's absence and father's neglect. In place of his emotional needs, he grew a kind of grievance and behaviors, including bullying, disrespect, and aggressiveness, which we clearly see today, that served their purpose in the moment, but became more problematic over time. With appropriate care and attention, they might have become overcome. They might have been overcome. This is from a great Frontline special that both Bill and I watched called Trump the Bully, How Childhood and Military Schools Shaped the Future President. Yeah, it was good and very enlightening.
There's one too where they compare his upbringing with Biden.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
It's also...
Is it Frontline?
One?
Okay, it might be Frontline. Right? Okay, yeah. I love Frontline. I think they do excellent work.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. And that might be I don't know if we watched the thing in its entirety. They could have done that. So, Fred Trump decided to send Donald to military school at 13, where the lessons in how to dominate would reach another level.
Well, because he kept doing shit and getting away with it.
Well, and not being praised for it.
Yeah.
Being praised for his, in military school, at least this military school.
Why they sent him then.
I think he was acting out. Probably because of the neglect and the abuse. And so they're like, let's go to military school. But he thrived there. He yelled at his classmates, says Trump biographer Mark Fisher, co-author of Trump Revealed. He pushed them around. He ruled dormitory life with an iron fist. Donald's father's overall message to his children was, and was a very different message to boys and girls, was compete, win, be a killer. This is what another author says. Do what you have to do to win. Donald Trump's relationship with his mother, Mary, was formative in a different way. She'd become, as we mentioned, seriously ill for a time when Trump was 2.5 years old. Very formative. Kids really need their mother at this age in particular. In her book, Mary Trump chronicles the lives of 3 generations of Trumps in her book and shows how trauma is passed from generation to generation. Carolyn, I'll have you at some point break down ACEs for like the millionth time.
And I did a genogram too of their family.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I love it.
I'll post that
extra credit, bitch.
Thanks.
But these are some of the factors Mary points out as adverse childhood experience experienced by baby Trump. Trump's father, emotionally neglectful when his son was a baby and a toddler. When Trump was older, his father was emotionally abusive. Trump's mother, emotionally neglectful. When her son was a toddler at a formative time in his brain development, he didn't receive those positive experiences necessary for healthy development. Trump watched his older brother be abused by his father for years, and Trump's mother had mental health problems of her own that seemed to have gone undiagnosed and untreated for years. Just neglect, abuse, all that shit. So, Carolyn, why don't you, and I have a feeling that your assessment is going to align with Mary's, diagnose Trump for us. But seriously, we need to talk about factors like abuse, neglect, and hardcore military school that shaped this dude.
Well, I think it's interesting. Thank you. Yes, I will. I think it's interesting, too, that when many people still hear the word abuse, they think violence.
Right.
And this is a perfect example of how emotional abuse, neglect, and lack of affection and really connection can really change someone's psychology. And not even their psychology, change their personality and their brain. And what's more interesting to me as well is that when you talked about the generational, let me go back to that genogram, which basically is like, family tree, right? Shorthand for psychology. So and this is interesting too, because he's always denied his German heritage. And said it was Scandinavian.
Interesting.
Which his father used. So Frederick Trump, which is his father's father, Trump's grandfather, he immigrated from Kallstadt, Germany. I'm probably saying that wrong. In 1885, he was a draft avoider.
Oh,
he was very sick, so he couldn't be part of the draft. He later tried to go back with his wife, with his wife, Elizabeth, and he couldn't. Bavaria was like, no, sorry, you can't be a part of our country. You didn't fight for it. Yeah. You can go back to the United States. And the United States at that time was very happy with German immigrants. They saw them as very desirable. But Frederick Trump and married a Scottish woman. She also came from, never mind, that's not important. So anyway, so then they had 3 sons. Fred's Trump's father. He married Marianne, who was a very, very poor domestic worker.
Interesting.
And she came from a very poor part of Ireland.
Oh, interesting.
And, so the Frederick, this again, this denial of his true heritage, his immigrant heritage.
Yeah.
But again, it's okay because it's white European Anglo-Saxon, right?
That's what he wants. He wants more immigration from Europe. That's what he keeps saying.
But, and again, he has these 3 failed marriages or 2 failed marriages, and then, which is not something you should.
No, 3 failed is appropriate. Okay. Yeah. No, I wouldn't say this one's going very well.
Okay. But again, only one of them was a Native American citizen, and only one of 5 of his children were born American citizens.
Yeah.
So he's to an American citizen. So he's got all this sort of like hatred about his past internalized in his family.
Yeah.
And this internalized definitely, again, far be it for me to ever self-diagnose someone without actually meeting them. But we're not just talking about a narcissist. This is one head injury away from being a psychopath.
Right. Well, I think he is a psychopath.
And he just never has murdered anyone.
I think he would if he could.
I think he would.
And now it looks like the Supreme Court.
He said he could. What was the first thing he said?
He said, I can shoot somebody in the streets of New York.
You'd still all vote for me.
Yep.
So, again, the fact the American Psychological Association actually has something called the Goldwater Rule, which inhibits mental health professionals from diagnosing public figures if they have not personally examined. But ethics aside, and that's important that I'm naming that because a lot of educators and psychologists have been silenced with their opinions because of that law.
Stupid.
Which is fucked up. So anyway, so if you look at the entire constellation of his family history, what you mentioned about his early childhood experiences, there seems to be substantial emotional trauma and a schema, which is, another way of saying how someone views themselves.
Yeah.
That he's had to develop in order not just to survive in his family, but he had very little choice but to align with the stronger, more abusive parent, which we talked about before, in order to gain a sense of self and connection. And you're supposed to individuate from your parents, and maybe you admire them, you want to be like a parent, but his admiration of his dad is a little sick. Yeah. Right. Why would you want to admire someone?
Well, he's admiring
like that?
Somebody's bad traits.
And his psychological background has so much in common with many violent offenders that you would see in correctional facilities. And so this correlation between early trauma, abandonment, and developmental arrest, plus a sick, emotionless mom. I don't even want to say she was emotionless. She sounded like she had a lot of trauma herself.
Yeah.
And maybe, who knows what being married to Fred was like. He probably, she goes from rags to riches. Who knows what type of emotional abuse he did to her.
Yeah.
So I want to be kind when I talk about that. But, like I said, his dad instructed him to be a killer.
Yeah.
So stage theory of morality is devised by Harvard psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg model. And we've talked about this before. It's backed by empirical research on children. Perpetrators of violence tend to be frozen in an early developmental stage. Like young children, they rarely take into account the concerns of others. They tend to obey only those who fear. And quote, such adults are incapable of sophisticated moral calculus. This is from Bandy Lee, who I'm going to talk about a lot. And introduce her shortly. But for Trump, the only reason not to do something, even if it's something that's likely to harm others, is to avoid punishment. And since he's really been held accountable for any of his misdeeds, which we've seen time and time again, he's basically come to believe that he's carte blanche to do whatever serves his immediate needs. So you mix this sort of, I don't even want to say adolescence because it's really even past that, but it's an opportunistic and corrupt rise to power in Manhattan. And you kind of have this real life succession that he went through.
It is very much like that.
What stands out to me, I mentioned too, is also his romantic history and his overall presentation, his temperament, his personality, which kind of has always been, I think, for you and I prior to all this election bullshit, was kind of a joke. That sort of satirically got mocked.
Right.
In, you think of like Saturday Night Live, and he was in a ton of movies when we grew up, the same way you look at OJ, right?
Yeah.
And he was this sort of rich tycoon, Richie Rich type. And then we'll talk about this later when The Apprentice came around, things got really weird, but I never imagined it would come to this. A 2021 Psychology Today article looked at Trump's paranoid, sadistic, and psychopathic tendencies, diagnosed him with narcissistic personality, and suggested he might suffer from neurological conditions like dementia and Alzheimer's. I don't think that's true. I've also heard that people think he's autistic. I don't think that's true.
I don't think
that's offensive to people on the spectrum.
Yes.
But he's not what I would consider normal in any way or representative of necessarily our values or politics. And I think we've all asked ourselves, okay, what the hell's wrong with this person then? So let me talk shortly about Bandy Lee. The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. She wrote a book. 27 psychiatrists, psychologists, and other mental health professionals argued that Trump's case, it was their moral and civic duty to warn America, which basically went against that golden.
I was going to say,
she lost her job. She got fired. I believe it was from Harvard, and she's since suing them.
Good.
That it supersedes professional neutrality.
Yeah.
And they explore Trump's symptoms. If you haven't read this book, it's fascinating. They explore Trump's symptoms, potentially relevant diagnosis, and find he's a complexly, and she quotes, a dangerous madman.
Right.
Philip Zimbardo and Rosemary Sword, for instance, explained, they're two psychologists.
Phil Zimbardo. Woo! We love him.
Explain Trump's impulsivity in terms of unbridled and extreme present hedonism. Craig Malkin writes on pathological narcissism and politics is a lethal mix. Gail Sheedy quotes on lack of trust that exceeds paranoia. Lace Dodds on sociopathy. Robert J. Lifton on malignant normality. In everyday life, that psychiatrists are being silenced and professionals are being silenced for fear of being seen as too political because that offends donors. So long story short, pathologizing aside, I can just use my logic and factual evidence to criticize Trump's policies related to women, sexual minorities, people of color, religious minorities, and everything in between.
Yeah, that's just the thing. I don't think you need an advanced degree in mental health or psychology to be able to see that there's something very wrong with this person.
And yet when you have people who have studied this and are educated, what is this reminding you of? This is reminding me of what happened in China, in Nazi Germany, who were the first to be
the educators.
The educators.
Always.
Because you have to keep your masses I don't want to say stupid.
Silenced
and ignorant.
Yeah. No, it's really important that you deprive these people of voice. And I think that everybody, unfortunately, has been so privy to Donald Trump's actions and words over the last 8 years, even prior to that it isn't difficult for somebody to come to a conclusion without the benefit of having a psychological degree. And for those who do have those degrees, Jesus Christ, putting a prohibition on what is so evident or saying what is so evident, like, come on.
Well, she wrote that book prior to the insurrection. And it wasn't until the insurrection that everyone came out and went, whoops, she got vindicated. And that's the article that I read that I found her. I'm obsessed with her now.
She sounds amazing. And I'll be reading her book too.
Yes.
So we're going to move away from Trump's childhood to this real estate mogul bullshit. So this is from a BBC article entitled Donald Trump's Life Story from Real Estate to Politics. So after earning a degree from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, by the way, the economists at the Wharton School say that his economic plan for this country is fucking disastrous. I just want to say that even his alma mater does not support this economic or shell of an economic plan, which seems to be predicated largely on tariffs. Anyway, I'm going to lay off that. So he became favored to succeed his father when his older brother, Fred, chose to become a pilot. God bless Fred. He's an amazing fucking guy from everything I've read. Cool dude. So Fred Trump died at 43 from alcoholism, something that his brother says led him to avoid alcohol and cigarettes his entire life. So Trump says he got into real estate with a small $1 million loan from his father before joining the company. Okay, guy. And this is, you got to remember, this is back in like the 60s or the 70s. $1 million was a lot of fucking money back then. It still is. Okay. He helped manage his father's extensive portfolio of residential housing projects in the New York City boroughs and took control of the company, which he renamed the Trump Organization in 71. So this is a perfect segue, I think, to discuss Trump's long history of racism. So this is from an NPR article. As Hillary pointed out when she debated Trump leading to the 2016 election, Donald started his career back in 1973 being sued by the Justice Department for racial discrimination because he would not rent apartments in one of his developments to Black people. And he made sure that the people who worked for him understood that this was the policy. The lawsuit was based on evidence gathered by testers for the New York City Human Rights Division, love it, which alleged that Black people who went to Trump's buildings were told there weren't any apartments available. A white person showed up, they were offered a unit. So back then, there was a woman named Sheila Morse, and she worked as one of those testers. And when a Black New Yorker was turned down for service and racial bias was suspected, Morse, who's white, would be dispatched to see if she received different treatment. Surprise, she did. In this case, a Black man in search of an apartment in Brooklyn in 72 saw a sign on a building, apartment for rent. Met with the superintendent. Superintendent was like, sorry, I forgot to take the sign down. We actually don't have an apartment. Enter Morse. Oh, we've got an apartment. We've got you. They greeted her with open arms, she said, and showed me every aspect of the apartment. Washington Post reporter Michael Kranish, co-author of the book Trump Revealed, tells NPR's Robert Siegel that the Justice Department considered the case one of the most significant race bias cases of the time. The Trumps took essentially the first settlement offer the federal government provided, Kranish said. The Trumps did not, in fact, have to admit guilt in settling the suit. The settlement did require the Trumps to place ads in newspapers saying they welcomed Black applicants. It said that the Trumps would familiarize themselves with the Fair Housing Act, which prohibited discrimination. So you guys, Trump has such a nasty track record when it comes to racism. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Central Park Five, because this one's really disgusting.
This is where I'm going to get sad.
I know. It really upsets me. It's such a miscarriage of justice. I don't think I could handle it. I'm familiar with the case. I don't think I need the movie. So this is from NBC. In 1989, Trump took out a full-page advertisement in the New York City newspapers calling for the return of the death penalty for 4 Black teenagers and a Latino teen who were falsely accused of having raped a jogger in Central Park. Their convictions were overturned, but Trump hasn't apologized, and he has consistently refused to walk back his comments, arguing that they had admitted guilt. He continued the refusal during the debate with Hillary. Okay, back to Trump's empire. Gross. Trump got out of residential real estate as quickly as he could. This is back to NPR. Under Trump, the family business shifted from residential units in Brooklyn and Queens to glitzy Manhattan projects. Tacky shit. Other properties bearing the Trump brand name, casinos, condos, golf courses, and hotels were erected too. Atlantic City, Chicago, Las Vegas, India, Turkey, the Philippines, all over the fucking world.
Franchise.
So my mom said she went to a hotel in Atlantic City because her late husband was from DC. And so they would go to the East Coast a lot. She said she went into one of his quote unquote bookstores and she said they only had books about Trump. Oh, and that it was junky as fuck. She said the hotel looked like a fucking garage sale.
I could completely picture it.
I was dying. It's a gilded garage sale, y'all. Okay, so people talk about what a business genius this guy is, but AI tells me different and says that although Trump has never filed for personal bankruptcy, hotels and casino businesses of his have declared bankruptcy 6 times between 1999 and 2009 due to its inability to meet required payments and to renegotiate debt with banks, owners of stock and bonds, and various small businesses. Trump also likes to not pay people who do work at his properties. He loves to screw over the American worker that he says he cares so much about. So Donald Trump often portrays himself as a savior of the working class who will protect your job. Bullshit. There was a USA Today network and plenty of other analyses and articles out there that found he's been involved in more than 3,500 lawsuits over the past 3 decades, and a large number of those involve ordinary Americans like this family called the Friels, who say Trump or his companies have refused to pay them. They were cabinet makers. And, like 20 years ago or something, they were owed almost $84,000 from the Trump company, went unpaid. So
do they not have it?
No, they just don't pay. Like Trump will find all sorts of excuses. It's like the contractor who comes to your house and does the job, and you're like, I'm not satisfied with this job. I'm not paying you. Like, did you see the Tommy Lee and Pam Anderson story?
No.
Where that's how the tape got leaked. So Seth Rogen is playing one of the contractors or carpenter, whatever.
That's right.
And he's like, I'm not fucking paying you. He's like, dude, you owe me X amount of money. So he's like, fuck this. So they stole that safe.
I went back to the movie Overboard, where
I love that movie.
Goldie Hawn doesn't like what Kurt Russell, and she's like, go back to Elk Snout. He's like, it's Elk Cove.
I totally forgot that movie, but it's a great one. So clearly this dude does not care about working Americans. So we want to take a shift. We're going to go into business real quick. All right. So this is more disgusting shit, because one of the businesses that he went into in the entertainment world was the owner of beauty pageants. First,
talked about this.
We did. We talked about him in our beauty pageant.
Amalgam of every single episode. Trump
really is
like everything the world, according to Jen and Carolyn, stands against.
Yes. Yes. It's very true. And we've talked about this. So owned Miss Universe, Miss USA, Miss Teen USA, and then he was the host creator of The Apprentice, which you mentioned. So, I think, again, we'd be remiss in not discussing the creepy, menacing shit that he did when he owned beauty pageants. So this is from a Rolling Stone article. So first, racism. So he was forced to sell the Miss Universe organization, which also includes sister scholarship programs, Miss USA and Miss Teen USA, in 2015 after his incendiary comments about Mexicans drove away broadcasters from NBC and Univision.
Well, good.
Yeah, for sure. So this just gets so bad. So a Miss USA contestant said, he came strolling right in, Dixon said, into the dressing room. There was no second to put a robe on or any sort of clothing. Some girls were topless, other girls were naked. Our first introduction to him was when we were at the dress rehearsal and half naked changing into our bikinis. Great.
What timing?
Oh yeah. I'm sure that was all just, a misunderstanding.
Awful.
His position as the pageant's owner entitled him to that kind of access, Trump explained, seemingly aware that what he was doing made the women uncomfortable. No men are anywhere, and I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant, and therefore I'm inspecting it. Is everyone okay? They're standing there with no clothes, and you see these incredible looking women. So I sort of get away with things like that. I'm pretty sure he said that on the Trump show. Trump now, or on the Stern show, sorry. Yeah. And Howard Stern is no fan of his now. And even during the first election against Hillary, he was like, sorry, I stand with Hillary. Like, at least Stern, whom I love.
To rewatch that show.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see, or listen to it, because it was audio. So the first Miss Universe crowned on Trump's watch was Miss Venezuela, Alicia Machado. Hillary Clinton famously invoked Trump's treatment of her during the first presidential debate. He was calling her Miss Piggy because she gained weight, and Miss Housekeeping because she's Latina. Awesome. The same year, former contestants say Trump unexpectedly entered the Miss Teen USA dressing room. Children. The reigning Miss Universe, Brooke Antoinette Mahalani Lee, recalls Trump asking her about the looks of his daughter Ivanka, who was co-hosting the pageant. Don't you think my daughter's hot? She's hot, right? That's fucking weird.
And that's like the least weird thing he said about his daughter.
I know. It's really creepy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to unpack. Also that year, Miss Utah, Temple Taggart, recalls Trump kissed her against her wishes. He kissed me directly on the lips. I thought, oh my God, gross. He was married to Marla Maples at the time. Okay, and let's go into rape, guys. Okay, it gets complicated, but we're going to go into it. So this is from a Newsweek article. Rape case brought against E. Jean Carroll. Okay, this is way complicated from a legal perspective, but we know this. In 2023, a Manhattan jury of 9 men and 3 women found the former president liable for sexually abusing and defaming Carroll, and she was awarded $5 million in damages. So It's really complicated, as I said, and I'm going to be careful about what I'm saying, but we look at the articles that we link because there's a sticking point around rape. But just know the most precise way to say this would be something like this. The jury found by a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Trump sexually abused Miss Carroll and was therefore was liable for battery. So, and this is my understanding. In civil cases, you have preponderance of the evidence. In criminal cases, you have, I can't remember, but it's like a burden of proof.
Okay.
But yeah, so this was a civil case. So this is what it came out to be. But anyway,
wow.
Carolyn, Trump infamously talked about grabbing women by the pussy, being entitled to do this because he's famous. I'm paraphrasing mostly because I don't want to vomit in my own mouth. If I give you a direct quote. Talk to us a bit about, let's make this a little more broad about why so often really powerful men get away with this kind of sexual assault.
Well, it's interesting that he sees himself as so virile and so masculine, which is such a trademark of dictators.
Yeah.
And this sort of, it helps illuminate to his fans or his, constituents, how great he is.
Yeah. I think fans is an appropriate word.
Is that fans?
Given
okay.
the fervor. Sorry.
But remember, no one is just born and poof, they're violent or poof, they're a rapist.
Right.
This is in the same way that I also want to be careful too when I talk about him being mentally ill. Mentally ill people aren't inherently violent either.
Nope.
That's what, again, that distinction there's, but when these things are combined, predators and predictors of violence, that's you can't look away from that. We've done too much research on this stuff, but dating back to the, again, the FBI agrees with these things. This is basically what our girl and mastermind Ann Burgess researched and proved.
Yeah.
Mixed childhood abuse and trauma, lack of accountability and consequences, and then add a little bit of money and privilege and being Caucasian.
It's a toxic combination.
I'm shocked that he has gotten, I'm not shocked that he has gotten away with so much.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Being an affluent perpetrator really secures your ability to get away with sexual assault, which is a horrific form of violation. I even want to say it's one of the most awful ones.
Yeah.
To the survivor. It brutalizes the survivor no matter what age, race, sexuality, or gender.
You feel so helpless.
You are
this
helpless. Is
somebody who's in the public eye in this instance, whom a lot of people like, and you're just not listened to.
I'm going to say they admire.
Yeah,
they really do. And like I said, this is we'll talk about the Trump supporter pathology.
I listen to a lot of hip hop, you guys, and especially in the 90s and the 2000s, there are so many lyrics that put Trump on a pedestal because he is.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He is the image of like gaudy affluence.
For white people?
Well, no, for everybody. Like he's painted himself, he's lied convincingly enough about being this portrait of the American dream and rolling around in like fancy cars and, a lot of things that appeal to folks in the hip hop world. Like, and me too, to an extent, like this is the pinnacle of wealth.
Yeah.
Like this dude flaunts it.
But it's a veneer.
It is a veneer.
And I don't know what's more disturbing to me, that he gets away with it, or the systems that are in place that are, you have evidence.
Right.
You have facts, you have people. What is going on?
Yeah.
That's the key thing in my mind about democracy is what is going on in our democracy and our judicial system.
Yeah.
That someone like this who can lie and do all this gets away with it.
Yeah.
And then I think about our kids and our teens who are asking to be accountable, and this is what they see.
Right.
Again, the Will Smiths, the Trumps, all they see is people getting away with it.
Yep.
And nothing happens.
Yeah.
My biggest fear was getting in trouble when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I was terrified of the principal.
Oh, yeah.
That's all we had. You don't have that anymore now.
No, you don't.
So
you absolutely don't.
Back to this. So Keith Davidson, law specializes in representing survivors of sexual violence and assault and wrote an article in 2022 that highlights the main reasons why people like Trump do get away with this time and time again. And let's see if we agree. I have a feeling we will. So this is from his website. When the super rich and powerful use their influence and money to manipulate others, it can make the victims, or I like to say survivors, feel hopeless and nowhere to turn for help, which is true. Fighting back against an influential person with vast wealth is impossible. They may often use sexual, and that's part of their being a predator, is they use sexual coercion tactics, can confuse their survivors and their victims into saying yes to sexual activity, although I think in many cases they've actually said no. And they're still, but I don't think when you're in that mindset, you hear that. Right. Your sense of entitlement, you wouldn't even recognize what a no is.
Well, you're taught
that's how dangerous he is.
Yeah, when your dad's telling you be a killer and don't take no for an answer, that applies to all facets of life.
This is just a challenge, right? So you wear them down. And some of the most common tactics of sexual coercion, and listen up, because this might be you. Making threats to spread rumors about the victim, making threats to their job or career, making threats to reveal the victim's sexual orientation, and making promises to the victim as a reward for sex. So that tit for tat that we've all seen when we watch sexual harassment, that we're all watching those goddamn 4-hour-long videos saying this is wrong. We agree not to do this. And then we're watching someone do it and nothing happens. What is going on?
I know. God, a lot's going on. But yeah, I just, God, it makes my flesh crawl. And I think what really bothers me is that so many people who call themselves Christians are Trump supporters. And it's like, do you really think Jesus would have bragged about grabbing women by the pussy? Like, Jesus wouldn't have done any of this.
Well, and this is beyond just a personality disorder. Or, again, we've talked about this is mental pathology plus criminal mindedness. And he's dangerous. And as a therapist, I worry, and as a human, I think you and I can both say we worry about the nation's public health, because what this does even to me is go, well, then why is there any social order? This is part of the adult human condition. You have to follow the rules. There's agreements we have as a society, and this guy gets away with it. The part of me, the younger sibling in me, that's like, that's not fair.
Well, it's a complete and total violation and dereliction of not just the social contract, but actual written codified laws. It's fucking disgusting.
Well, but it makes you go, well, then why do any of us follow the laws? And that's why you see the insurrection.
No, I think that's important to mention. And, we'll get there. We'll dive into that more in the second part of this. So we're going to talk about, the rise from reality star to president.
This is really important.
How did this happen? Let's go on a weird historical journey, to borrow Tim Walls's word to describe these folks, which I think is important. Weird. Here's a timeline of Trump's history and politics according to TV Guide. So 1987 to 1988, Trump considers a run for president while simultaneously juggling large debts stemming from his purchase of the Taj Mahal Casino, which I don't think is there anymore. 2000, Trump enters the presidential race as a Reform Party candidate, receives more than 15,000 votes in the party's California primary. Good God.
What's the Reform Party?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know much about them, I should say. I know of their existence. I don't know. I think there are a lot of parties out there that aren't typically acknowledged outside of our two-party system. So with the exception of the Green Party, most folks know about that. Peace and Freedom Party. We really should. So Trump so this is 2003 to 2004. Trump begins hosting The Apprentice. He again mulls for a run for president, but ultimately decides not to join the race. And we have March 2011. This is from a Wall Street Journal, NBC News poll. It shows Trump actually leading all presidential contenders, including Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney, who has become a vocal critic of Trump and says the only reason he can, quote unquote, afford to do so is because he can afford 24-hour security to protect his family, because he constantly receives threats from these fucking psychos like the ones you saw out there on January 6th. So April 2011, amid more research polls indicating that he would be the preferred Republican presidential candidate among voters, Trump repeatedly calls for President Obama to release his birth certificate. May 2011, Trump officially announces he won't run for president. Then comes February 2012, Trump endorses Republican candidate Mitt Romney for president. 2013, Trump forms a presidential exploratory committee, but, despite a strong backing from other Republicans, he's like, nah, I ain't going to do it. Then, unfortunately, in February 2015, he decides not to renew his apprenticeship contract and then starts to speculate about running for president. The rest is fucking history. We know what happened, election day. He defeats Hillary Clinton with, remember this, 46.2% of the popular vote and 57.2% of the electoral vote. Trump wins many Democratic votes, but loses the popular vote by about 2.8 million votes. Almost 3 million people in this country did not vote for him. We're going to do an episode on the Electoral College too, because a lot of people don't understand. And
you just vote. And the yes is the verse. It's like high school, right?
One person, one vote. We'll talk, when we do, about the Electoral College, about its roots in slavery and the racist kind of origins of our country.
Clearly, I was not paying attention in U.S. government.
So, I'm going to skip around here, but I think this is awesome. Robert Wright compiled a list of Trump's 10 most egregious things that he did when he was primarily in the presidency, but also before and after. And it's funny because it's not a list of 10. It's like a list of 100 things. If you don't know who Robert Reich is, he's amazing. He's a chancellor's professor of public policy at the University of California, Berkeley. Woo! A senior fellow at the Blum Institute or the Blum Center. He's incredibly insightful. He was Secretary of Labor in the Clinton administration. He's one of the 10 most effective cabinet secretaries of the 20th century, according to Time magazine. So let's talk about Trump a little bit. So murder actually went up under Trump. And I talked about this in our most recent TikTok. He presided over the largest every single year increase in homicides in 2020. And this might be because gun sales broke records under Trump. He bragged about how he did nothing. We had more than 1,700 mass shootings under this man. When there was that racist uprising in Charlottesville, he said there were very fine people on both sides. Well, these were neo-Nazis who were marching. Trump allied himself with the Proud Boys, a violent hate group. Remember, stand by, stand back. They certainly did that. Trump brags about getting rid of Roe v. Wade, which he did with all of the people he was able to get into the Supreme Court. He promoted fake COVID cures. Remember that? Injecting people with disinfectants. Awesome. And because he did this, poison control centers received a spike in emergency calls. Awesome. He talks about how strong his economy was. Trump presided over a net loss of 2.9 million American jobs, the worst recorded job numbers of any U.S. president in history.
Does that have to do with COVID, though?
I think to an extent it does. But remember, COVID happened at the end of his presidency.
Okay.
As he was on his way out, Joe Biden was on his way in and had to come in and try to fix all the shit that Trump did. Now, I know, obviously, we have inflation and all these other things that came out of COVID and aren't Joe Biden's fault. And, he's basically trying to fix all of the shit that Trump left him with. And that's usually how it goes. And it takes more than 4 years to fix these things. Yeah. So, the list goes on and on and on. He invited a mob to Capitol Hill on January 6th. He said, be there. It will be wild. There's so much stuff that he did. Knowing the crowd had deadly weapons on January 6th, he ordered them to go to the Capitol and, quote, fight like hell. What the fuck does that mean? They certainly read into it. So, this list goes on and on and on. And it's a great list. It really shows how dangerous this person is. It really shows how unhinged he is.
National debt increased by 40%.
Oh, yeah. So if you think...
It's just like his businesses.
Exactly. He's running the country the way he ran his businesses. And we all know how that went. So I think many of us are still trying to figure out how this happened, this being him being elected president and how it could potentially happen again. It's a very strong chance that it could happen again. I have to take a deep breath because it freaks me out. So Carolyn,
let's have a micro moment.
We need a moment. 415 breathing, as I used to say to the kids when I was doing workforce development work with them. In through the nose for 4 seconds, out through the mouth for 5. All right, 415.
Hold it down in your gut.
Yeah,
activate that vagus nerve.
Yes,
stop sending cortisol out, brain.
Yes. So, Carolyn, could you give us at least one psychological reason why so many people voted for someone with no political experience who did horrible things, admittedly, before, during, and after the election?
Well, Trump has a highly loyal and very motivated base of support.
This is true.
That's my a political way of saying.
It's a very nice way of saying basket of deplorables.
Yeah.
As Hillary said.
Well, and I'll go into that a little bit too. Because remember, if we are talking about a cult and followers, there's some trauma involved.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I'll play both sides a little bit. But
you're being nice, and I appreciate that.
All right. So let's talk about, I'm going to talk about 3 factors, but I'm only going to talk about the one of them in this episode. So you're going to have to watch or listen to the next one. But have you ever heard of parasocial bonding?
I feel like we've talked about it on this show.
Yes, we have. But let's go more in depth. Okay. So one hypothesis in parasocial bonding, which is it's a one-sided relationship formed with a person they have never met. It's not reciprocated. So
I have that with Ian Somerhalder.
You do, but you've met him.
I have met him,
and he has reciprocated some of who he is to you.
It's very kind. Yes.
Not some of the more erotic things. I think you imagine.
I am a married woman, and he is a married man, but in another life, baby.
But we have talked about this when we've talked about online dating.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when you see this in politics. So this is typically seen with, like I said, any one-sided relationship, even in a real life crush, but it's more commonly through the media because it's so potent and immersive when you see with your human senses, the same way we talk about, like I said, with internet dating. You've never even met this person, but the one, again, in real life, I want to say that if you and I actually met Trump, we would have the icks. Like our white lady, like be afraid of this guy.
Yeah.
He's creepy would definitely go off.
Bells and whistles.
And it takes our brain's going to fill in the blanks when we haven't actually met someone.
Right.
And this is scientifically based. We've researched this, that real reactions basically with our fantasy, that individual needs to align with that fantasy.
Yes.
We want that to stay.
Yes.
So University of Buffalo psychologist Shira Gabriel theorized that things would have been much different if it had not been for Trump's 14-year reign as a reality TV star.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm really glad you brought up that point because, like I said, Trump was just sort of this like thing. He was sort of, again, that kind of, a satirical tycoon that like stuffed money in his bag and like ran off, But, even not having learned anything that I knew about him, now I know that's not even really true.
Right.
So she quotes Shira Gabriel, "I strongly believe that Trump would not be president if it were not for being on The Apprentice and The Celebrity Apprentice," says Gabriel, lead author of a recent study published in the Journal of Social Psychology and Personality Science. It examines how parasocial bonds people forged with Trump through their television set and contributed to his victory. In a way, says Gabriel, television mimics reality stars and the relationship develops slowly over time and at regular intervals. So results showed compelling evidence that parasocial bonding led people to like Trump, to believe the promises he made, and to discount the negative stories about him that surfaced during the campaign, says Gabriel. They also revealed a correlation with voting behavior. The more people that watched Trump on his reality shows, the more likely they were to form a bond, which in turn predicted the way they would vote for him.
Yeah.
And the biggest component to mental and physical well-being is connection, real or imagined. It doesn't matter, especially these days. So that bond felt real to people. And again, that's not necessarily, well, in this case, it's bad, but it's not a bad thing. We do that in politics and media, and we depend on that type of bonding to build connection with an otherwise untouchable person. I fucking loved Obama, and I was like, I know him. He's my guy. I've never met him.
Yeah. I feel like that's a bit different though. Like he was, he had the traits you look for in a president that are admirable.
Well, and this leads me to wonder, what is it about the psychology of a Trump supporter? Again, we're talking a lot about the person, but he's one person.
Right.
Why aren't we looking more at these masses? And I think people are, and there's so much data out there and so much great writing. Again, I'm looking at the side that's sort of more cautionary. I hesitate because I don't want it on my computer. Yeah. But you've always said, like, you want to talk to the people who kind of have the other side of it. Yeah. I am interested in what they say.
Yes.
Typically, it's just rhetoric that they're hearing on social media. They're keyboard warriors.
Yeah.
They're mimicking. This is me talking off the cuff here. I have nothing to back this up. I don't think that they have a lot of sense of self. I think their identity is very much wrapped in this sort of superhero kind of satanic type character who he is. He's
he's an anti-hero.
He's someone who he defies everything. And then he brings them in. We're going to talk about this a lot more, factor 2 and 3. We're going to explore that in the next episode, but they have to do with cult personality and a destabilized human.
Yeah.
Which I think the supporters themselves are a little destabilized and lacking a lot of identity as well.
Sure.
And feeling marginalized. Mm-hmm. And for many, for lack of, again, for my facts, they are marginalized.
Yes.
They're working class, poor whites.
Yes.
Boohoo, right? But they still have seen this prophet, like this hero, this person who gets away with everything and telling him he's going to save them.
Yeah.
They believe it.
Yeah.
And why shouldn't they? He's done it.
It's true. And I do feel for these people. And I do often wonder how somebody who, for instance, works 2 jobs just to put food on the table could ever think that somebody like Donald Trump would rectify the state of our socioeconomic system in order to benefit them. That's what I don't understand.
The only thing I can go back to is, again, Nazi Germany and Hitler saying it's the Jews' fault.
It is. And this is what he's doing.
Working class German folks. Yep. This is all he's doing, them versus us.
Right.
And when he does this, he builds their confidence in themselves.
Yes. Yeah. You might not have, it's such a tactic that's been used since the founding of this country to divide people from uniting around what makes them similar.
Well, look at the Civil War, even.
Yeah.
That's not in our time period, but you know what I mean? That's in our nation's history.
And that was all for money, though. And then the wanting to maintain free labor for the economic purpose of being able to generate wealth for free.
Yeah.
Off the backs of slaves. And that's why that war was fought. And, we see systemic racism still being very much a part, we who are paying attention, very much a part of our system and playing out in different ways.
Yes.
And when, following the Civil War and following emancipation and the white people in power seeing that poor whites and poor blacks, poor whites working in an indentured servant type role, along with black folks who were sharecropping and doing shit work still, they were starting to coalesce and they were starting to create an uprising. And that's when the powers that be said, hey, white people, we're going to give you some property and we're also going to float or continue to perpetuate this ideology of white supremacy.
That's what we're really talking about.
That's what we're talking about.
And that's what I think I hope that starts being talked about more, because the reason this guy has come to power is because there is a huge portion of when you and I say the we, that we're not the we.
No,
the we is a group that does not want to lose their white supremacy.
Right. And we're okay with it. We understand that we're going to have to give a little of our power and privilege, which we do benefit regardless of whether or not we're a fan of the system. We're willing to say, you know what, for the benefit of everybody else, for equity, fuck it. But there's a lot of people who don't want to because that's all they have.
Yes.
So they live in a fucking shack. They can barely put food on their table. Like they're living paycheck to paycheck, or they're unemployed, or they're working in fucking coal mines. Like that is
still
all
happening
they
in
have.
Appalachia.
Yeah.
And that's, when Kamala says we are not this.
Yeah.
I worry about that statement because she's speaking to the you and I we's.
Right.
And we're not the majority.
Yeah.
We're just not.
We need somebody to say, are you angry? I get why you're angry.
Yeah.
And you should be angry at policies that have been created and perpetuated by people like Donald Trump.
Yes.
Now, I'm not giving a pass to establishment Democrats because we've done, well, I wouldn't say I'm an establishment Democrat. I'm a democratic socialist, but establishment Dems have done their fair share to support and entrench.
What's an establishment Democrat?
It's somebody who's okay with corporations and, somebody a little more middle of the road, like Joe Biden was.
Okay.
I think his presidency has been more progressive than any of us thought it would be, particularly around union support. It's been wonderful, which is why I don't understand union people saying, I'm voting for the felon. It's like, you understand that.
I saw that on a bumper sticker 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I saw the union my husband works for. They had that sticker. And then they had the I'm voting for the felon underneath it. And I'm like, he doesn't believe in your right to unionize. He believes in right to work states. Like, you're going to be paying. If Donald Trump has his way, right to work means even if the people at your company have a union, you can say, I don't want to be a part of this union. I'm not paying my dues. But if something happens to me and I need mediation and I need the union support, I'm going to get it regardless of whether or not I've paid into that system. It's unfair.
No.
And that's what Donald Trump would have. And with Project 2025, civil servants like me would no longer be allowed to unionize. It's bullshit. Yeah. Anyway, I went down a long rabbit hole here. So we're going to... It's all important
shit. What's your final thought, Jen?
Clearly I read a lot and, I'm
good.
Deeply,
I'm glad.
Well, when you work in local government, you are impacted by what happens at both the state and the federal level. And we are very committed to, I have to be careful, and clever about the way that we make equity front and center of our programs and our policies. But that becomes more difficult when you have somebody like Donald Trump at the helm, who is revoking laws and revoking policies that protect people of color who have been marginalized and disenfranchised since the beginning of this country.
Well, and would you say that's different in San Francisco than, let's say, a red state in Texas?
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So they're going on the opposite side.
Right.
That when someone like Trump gets elected, they benefit.
Yes, absolutely.
So you have civil workers against each other, people within the government against one another. This is really not a good system.
It's not a good system
really
for a number of reasons. We need some improvement. We're not going to solve that here today or probably in our lifetime. I think the planet is going to kick us out first. The planet's going to expel us.
Nature, Mother Gaia is going to say, y'all, this...
like the parasites that we are. and the earth is going to continue with or without us.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think we're going to hasten our demise with people like Donald Trump at the helm. So, our final thought really, I don't know. I think we've said enough.
I don't think we've said enough. I could go on and on.
Really, yeah, there's so much to be said.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep saying it. And like we said, we're going to kind of look at the anatomy of this attempted coup on January 6th, talk about these devotees and why they were so pumped to overthrow the country on behalf of, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, the worst president this country has ever seen. So go pour yourself a nice, strong drink. Yep. You probably need it. I know I do. I wish it weren't 10 o'clock in the morning.
All I have is coffee.
Yeah, I'll probably need more coffee. Anyway, y'all, we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Remember, you can find us on TikTok at TWATJC. That's TWATJC. You can also, by virtue of clicking on our profile there, get to us on YouTube. And then from YouTube, you can find us on Spotify and Apple. Don't forget that shit. Listen to us. Bye.
Bye.